This Italian polymath left thousands of pages of writings and drawings, but rarely made any references to his personal life. The resulting uncertainty, combined with mythologized anecdotes from his lifetime, has resulted in much speculation and interest in his personal life, particularly personal relationships, philosophy, religion, vegetarianism, left handedness, and appearance. Leonardo was born on April 15, 1452, at the third hour of the night in the Tuscan hill town of Vinci, in the lower valley of the Arno River in the territory of Florence. He was the illegitimate son of Messer Piero Frosino di Antonio da Vinci, a Florentine notary, and Caterina, a peasant who may have been a slave from the Middle East. Leonardo had no surname in the modern sense. Da Vinci simply meaning of Vinci. His full birth name was Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci, meaning Leonardo, son of Ser Piero from Vinci. Little is known about Leonardo's early life. He spent his first 5 years in the hamlet of Anciano, then lived in the household of his father, grandparents, and uncle Francisco in the small town of Vinci. His father had married a 16-year-old girl named Alberia, who loved Leonardo but died young. In later life, Leonardo only recorded two childhood incidents. One, which he regarded as an omen, was when a kite dropped from the sky and hovered over his cattle, its tail feathers brushing his face. The second occurred while exploring the mountains. He discovered a cave that was both terrified and some great monster might lurk there, and driven by curiosity to find out what was inside. Leonardo's early life has been subject to historical conjecture. Vasari, the 16th century biographer of Renaissance painters, tells of how a local peasant requested that Sir Piero ask his talented son to paint a picture on the round block. Leonardo responded with a painting of snakes spitting fire, which was so terrifying that Sir Piero sold it to the Florentine art dealer, who sold it to the Duke of Milan. Meanwhile, having made a profit, Sir Piero bought a block decorated with the heart pierced by an arrow, which he gave to the peasant. In 1466, at the age of 14, Leonardo was apprenticed to one of the most successful artists of his day, Andrea di Sioni, known as Verrocchio. Verrocchio's workshop was at the center of the intellectual currents of Florence, assuring the young Leonardo of an education in the humanities. Other famous painters apprenticed or associated with the workshop include Girgalandio, Perugino, Botticelli, and Lorenzo di Credi. Leonardo would have been exposed to a vast range of technical skills and had the opportunity to learn drafting, chemistry, metallurgy, metalworking, plaster casting, leatherworking, mechanics, and carpentry, as well as the artistic skills of drawing, painting, sculpting, and modeling. Much of the painted production of Verrocchio's workshop was done by his employees. According to Vasari, Leonardo collaborated with Verrocchio on his baptism of Christ, painting the young angel holding Jesus' robe in a manner that was so far superior to his master's that Verrocchio put down his brush and never painted again. This is probably an exaggeration. On close examination, the painting reveals much that has been painted or touched up over the tempera using the new technique of oil paint, the landscape, the rocks that can be seen through the brown mountain stream, and much of the figure of Jesus bearing witness to the hand of Leonardo. Leonardo himself may have been the model for two works by Verrocchio, including the bronze state of David in the Bargello and the Archangel Michael in Tobias and the Angel. By 1472, at the age of 20, Leonardo qualified as a master in the Guild of St. Luke, the Guild of Artists and Doctors of Medicine. But even after his father set him up in his own workshop, his attachment to Verrocchio was such that he continued to collaborate with him. Leonardo's earliest known dated work is a drawing in a pen and ink of the Viarno Valley drawn on 5 August 1473. Court records of 1476 show that Leonardo and three young men were charged with sodomy and acquitted. From that date until 1478, there is no record of his work or even of his whereabouts, although it is assumed that Leonardo had his own workshop in Florence between 1476 and 1481. He was commissioned to the paint an altarpiece in 1478 for the chapel of St. Bernard and the adoration of the Magi in 1481 for the monks of San Donato e Scopeto. In 1482, Leonardo helped secure peace between Lorenzo di Medici and Ludovico il Moro, Duke of Milan. Leonardo wrote a letter to Ludovico describing his engineering and painting skill. He created a silver lyre in the shape of a horse head with which he was sent to Milan. Leonardo continued to work in Milan between 1482 and 1499. He was commissioned to paint the Virgin of Rocks for the Confraternity of the Immaculate Conception and the Last Supper for the monastery of Santa Maria degli Greci. While living in the Milan between 1493 and 1495, Leonardo listed a woman called Caterina among his dependents in his taxation documents. When she died in 1495, her list for funeral expenditure suggests that she was his mother. His work for Ludovico included floats and pageants for special occasions, designs for a dome for Milan Cathedral, and a model for a huge equestrian monument to Francisco Sforza, Ludovico's predecessor. Leonardo modeled a huge horse in clay which he became known as Gran Cavallo and surpassed in size the large equestrian statues of the Renaissance. 70 tons of bronze were set aside for casting it. The monument remained unfinished for several years, which was not usual for Leonardo. In 1492, the model was completed and Leonardo was making detailed plans for its casting. Michelangelo rudely implied that Leonardo was unable to cast it. In November 1494, Ludovico gave the bronze to be used for cannons to defeat the city from invasion by Charles VIII. At the start of the Second Italian War in 1499, the invading French troops used this life-size clay model for the Gran Cavallo for target practice. With Ludovico Sforzo overthrown, Leonardo with his assistants Salai and friend mathematician Luca Pacioli fled Milan for Venice, where he was employed as a military architect and engineer devising methods to defend the city from naval attack. On his return to Florence in 1500, he and his household were guests of the Servite monks at the monastery of Santissima Annunziata and were provided with a workshop where, according to Vasari, Leonardo created the cartoon of the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne and Saint John the Baptist, a work that won such admiration that men and women, young and old, flocked to see it, as if they were attending a great festival. In 1502, Leonardo entered the service of Caesar Borgia, the son of Pope Alexander VI, acting as a military architect and engineer and traveling throughout Italy with his patron. He returned to Florence, where he was joined the Guild of St. Luke on 18 October 1503 and spent 2 years designing and painting a great mural of the Battle of Anghiari for the Signoria, with Michelangelo designing its companion piece, the Battle of Cascina. In Florence in 1504, he was part of a committee formed to relocate against the artist Will Michelangelo's statue of David. In 1506, he returned to Milan. Many of Leonardo's most prominent pupils or followers in painting either knew or worked with him in Milan, including Bernardino Luini, Giovanni Antonio Boltraffio, and Marco di Oggione. However, he did not stay in Milan for long because his father had died in 1504. And in 1507, he was back in Florence trying to sort out problems with his brothers over his father's estate. By 1508, he was back in Milan, living in his own house in Porta Orientale in the parish of Santa Babila. From September 1513 to 1516, Leonardo spent much of his time living in the Belvedere in the Vatican in Rome, where Raphael and Michelangelo were both active at the time. In October 1515, Franco I of France recaptured Milan. On 19 December, Leonardo was present at the meeting of Franco I and Pope Leo X, which took place in Bologna. It was for Franco that Leonardo was commissioned to make a mechanical lion which could walk forward, then open its chest to reveal a cluster of lilies. In 1516, he entered Francois' service, being given the use of the manor house Clos Lucy near the king's residence at the royal chateau Amboise. It was here that he spent the last years of his life, accompanied by his friend and apprentice, Count Francisco Melzi, supported by a pension totaling 10,000 squidi. Leonardo died at Clos Lucy, France on May 2, 1519. Franco I had become a close friend. Vasari records that the king held Leonardo's head in his arms as he died, although his story, beloved by the French and portrayed in romantic paintings by Ingres, Menoghiot and the other French artists may be legend rather than fact. Vasari also tells us that in his last days, Leonardo sent for a priest to make his confession and to receive the Holy Sacrament. In accordance to his will, 60 beggars followed his casket. He was buried in the chapel of Saint Herbert in the castle of Amboise. Melzi was the principal heir and executor, receiving as well as money Leonardo's paintings, tools, library, and personal effects. Leonardo also remembered his half long-time people and companion, Salai and his servant Battista di Vilusis, who each received half of Leonardo's vineyards, his brothers who received land, and his serving women who received a black cloak of good stuff with a fur edge. Some 20 years after Leonardo's death, Franco was reported by the goldsmith and sculptor Benvenuto Cellini as saying, "There had never been another man born in the world who knew as much as Leonardo, not so much about painting, sculpture, and architecture, as he was a very great philosopher."